We are live now, Chair.
Thanks very much, Carrie-Anne. Good morning, everyone. Borada, and welcome to the 10th of September meeting of Powys County Council Governance and Audit Committee. I'd like to welcome all members of the committee, other county councillors who have joined us, any guests and officers who are with us today. Carrie-Anne, could you just record any apologies, please?
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from officers Dr. Richard Jones, Nina Davis and Paul Bradshaw.
Thank you very much. And I do understand that a couple of members, elected members, are having connectivity issues and may have to drop in and out. And if that happens, it's understandable. But my understanding is that all members of the committee are present and that we will remain quorate for the whole meeting. So thank you very much for your attendance. I'll move us to item 2, please. Are there any disclosures of interest in connection with today's agenda? If you could please raise your hand and signal if there are. I'm not seeing any, so we'll move on to agenda item 3, which is the minutes of the 16th of July meeting. As you'll notice from the agenda, I had to send apologies to that meeting, and my vice chair, John Brottingham, very kindly agreed to chair. So I can't comment on the accuracy or anything of the meeting, but I will take any questions and then ask for a show of hands to confirm that the committee is content to record the minutes as an accurate record. Councillor Peat, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's on page 6 around scheduling the review of the whistleblowing annual report and the whistleblowing policy. And I was just wondering when we would be scheduling that, because the working group finished its work and would be very keen to see those reviews in place, please.
Thank you very much. I think just building on Councillor Peat's comment, I think what I'm interested in is to get the date of the regular annual whistleblowing report onto the forward work plan, and when we receive that, to also see the updated policy and guidance, which was updated, or we understand was going to be updated following the work of the whistleblowing working group, which was ably supported by colleagues from legal and HR. So if anyone could just give us assurance about dates for that, please.
Chair, sorry, I got difficulty getting my video up there, Chair. Sorry, the report came from the working group at the last meeting, I think, Councillor Peter. Is that right?
Sorry, Clive, I was on mute there. I can't remember the exact data when it.
So what I'm going to suggest is that we have it annually, following that 12-month review. So that's my suggestion, Chair.
Thank you very much. As long as it goes on the forward work plan and on the first annual report, we see the updated guidance with it to supplement following the work that your colleagues helped us with, which, to be fair, was good. Pete, is your hand still raised? Do you want to come back on that?
No, if I could just come back on clarity. Yeah, apologies, Chair, and apology, Clive. I can't remember the last date when we did it, but happy if that's annualised coming forward into this year. But just for clarity, can we just confirm that we will also look at the policy and that the report will have the additional information that the working group requested, please?
Chair, the report will certainly have the additional information requested by the group, no problem at all. In terms of the review of the policy, we don't do this on an annual basis, but we will sort of do a mini review, I think, and report what the mini review says. So if that's acceptable to the committee.
Yeah, thanks. I think Councillor Peat, I'm not speaking on for you, but I think you and I are probably in agreement that the working group and I emphasise extremely well supported by HR and legal colleagues, made some recommendations that were deemed to be acceptable, to and improvements to avoid some duplication and improve the clarity of the policy and guidance, and we developed flowcharts and various things. And I think what we're very keen to be assured of is that work is being drawn into the policy now, and it's not waiting for a, a sort of 3-yearly or a 5-yearly review, that the update can be made now, and then the policy will fall back into its
Yeah,
regular
Chair,
review.
thank you for the clarity. I had assumed, but I don't know, that the recommendations the working group had already been put into the policy, but I will check. And if not, we will make sure that's done, because you're absolutely right. It shouldn't wait for 3 years.
Yeah, thank you very, very much, Clive. I do appreciate that. And I can see Gemma, who's one of the people who supported us so ably, with her hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to confirm that yes, all those recommendations have been put in, and we're about to launch that on our website now as well. So all of that will be in place.
Thank you very much, Gemma, for that confirmation. Councillor Pete, is that okay on the whistleblowing bit of
Yes,
the
yeah,
minute?
thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll just echo your comments and your thanks as well. And just the one final bit, sorry, being pedantic for clarity, was as well, we were going to make sure that the whistleblowing policy was aligned with the whistleblowing code. So just to make sure
Yes.
we don't lose sight of that point as well, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Pete. On the minutes, from me, albeit I wasn't present at the meeting, on page 6, it talks about the governance review, which Audit Wales are currently conducting. I think all the interviews have now been completed, and it talks about reporting in October. And I just wondered if that was perhaps an optimistic deadline. And I guess from the committee's perspective, and given our obvious particular interest in this because it is a governance review, if Audit Wales colleagues and officers could comment and give some assurance around what is a reasonable date for this committee to expect the review report to come to it, please.
Yeah, sure, Chair, that's fine. Just so that you know, the interviews and everything that we require for fieldwork has taken place. The likelihood is that we'll get the report done in its draft form by the end of October, early November. Obviously, at that point in time, then it will need to go to officers for them to have a look at it and agree with the recommendations or make any tweaks that they think are required. So obviously that will need to be taken into consideration. And then once we get the management responses back from officers, that's then when it will be coming through to Governance and Audit Committee.
Okay. Jane, any comment from you?
Only that we'll wait to get the report back. And those are the timelines that were confirmed to me when I met recently with the performance audit team. So yeah, we'll get it through as soon as we can after it's come back to us. And obviously it needs to go through our own governance internally before being released to Governance and Audit Committee as well.
Yeah, thank you. I understand all of that, but I think it goes without saying that the committee will be very disappointed if this takes a very long time to come to the public committee. And we'll watch with interest as the draft progresses through the necessary fact checking and management action developing. The other question I just had on the minute was on page 8. There's a comment towards the bottom of page 8 where councillors expressed concern about the dominance of pre-decision scrutiny and the lack of post-decision review, and then there's a blank box. I wondered if that was something with the minutes, or if I was surprised that there wasn't something in that box to record that officers had responded to that point, but perhaps they didn't, and I wasn't in attendance at the meeting, so perhaps I'll just leave that and note that I find that a bit curious, that no one responded to that. If there are any other comments on points of clarification on the minutes? I can see Councillor William has his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I recall that the presentation on anti-fraud activities was particularly well received. I think it also fairly understandably received a degree of coverage in the local media after the event. Could you remind us, or could an officer relevant to it please remind us how frequently this comes to committee? Because I think there were some quite significant items that had been recovered there as a result of the activity of the unit, and it was a Q1 report, but I didn't think it came to us each quarter, but I just would appreciate knowing that, because it seems central to our activities and the kind of topic that obviously is going to continue to play on the minds of the public out there, particularly in the times we live in.
Thank you very much, Councillor William. Mary, I can see your hands up.
It is. Good morning, everyone. Yes, it is a quarterly report, so it does come through every quarter. Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying that. I didn't realise it was quite so frequent. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. If there are no further points of clarification, correction, or matters arising from the minute, I'll ask members of the committee if they are content to approve the minute of the 16th of July. Perhaps someone would. Councillor Pate and Councillor Chris to second that. Thank you very much, colleagues. We'll now move on to our SWAP internal audit items. And I'm just going to change the order of these items, colleagues, and we will move to agenda item 8 first. And in doing so, we will welcome to the committee Rich Clark, who is the recently appointed Chief Executive Officer of SWAP. I think Rich has probably listened or looked at our meetings, but this is the first opportunity we've had to formally welcome him to one of our meetings. So Rich is going to stay for us as long as he can for our items, but we'll move to item 8, which is a presentation and discussion led by Rich on the global internal audit standards. So Rich, if I can hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you for the invitation and bore da. So as per the introduction, my name's Rich Clark. I've been Chief Executive of SWAP for nearly just over 6 months now. Been in local government, internal audit and external audit for 25 years, firstly with the Audit Commission. And I'm also, as particularly relevant to this presentation, I'm the UK representative on the Internal Audit Standards Board, so sort of heavily involved in internal audit standards and their development. And what you have on the papers this morning is a presentation I've drawn up, which runs through the headlines from a member and committee perspective of the new global internal audit standards. These were published by the Global Institute of Internal Audit, which is a member organisation that covers, well, the globe, basically. The standards are available in more than 30 languages, not including Welsh. I did check this morning, but that's not among the languages that is available, but Ukrainian, Indonesian, Chinese are. And really, it sets a baseline standard for the profession of internal audit across the world. But it also requires individual jurisdictions and individual sectors to adapt the standards as befits their circumstance. And that's a significant role of the Internal Audit Standards Board that I sit on. And so for the UK public sector purposes, these standards, which were originally published in January 24, became effective on the 1st of April 2025, subject to some adaptations. So you have a full presentation which sort of runs through that legal background and the superseded standards and etc. But mindful of your time and the busy agenda you have, I'll focus on the substantive slides starting from page 61 of your pack. And these are the ones which detail really what the standards require that you might see as committee members. And the first of those is this internal audit mandate and charter, which is a foundational document. And for all the work that the Standards Board does translating the global standards to UK use, the charter is where it really becomes relevant to individual organisations. So the charter is where it's set out how those professional standards will manifest within the individual organisation, such as Powys Council. And one of the main vehicles it does that through is what's called essential conditions. So the standards themselves set out things like the audit committee will support internal audit, the audit committee will support internal audit's independence, the audit committee will advocate for the practice of internal audit. There are some of those essential conditions that don't apply or can't really apply in the UK public sector. Setting the pay and conditions of the chief audit executive is one of them in the original draft. Setting the budget of internal audit is one of them in the original draft. Those obviously don't quite operate in that fashion. But what you should see, and so looking ahead, you would expect to see is a charter that describes how those essential conditions apply for your organisation. There's been a slight delay in that in the UK public sector because SITFA as an organisation were quite late in getting their guidance out, not until February, by which point a lot of organisations had already published their charters for 25-26. So this is something you'd expect to see really in full from next year. Page 62 on strategy and resourcing, the standards do make great play of making sure that the internal audit service has sufficient resources to deliver the promise of that charter. So it anticipates possibly a more back and forth conversation that might be typically the case in a lot of places about, does the internal audit service have confidence that its resources are sufficient to deliver the assurance that the organisation needs? And that sufficiency comprises three different lenses, both the financial resources, so is there the budget, do we have the right people, but also does the service have access to the right technology, both in terms of things like electronic working papers and data analytics tools and anything else that it might need. And there is a sort of an expectation in the standards that that will be a dialogue between the chief audit executive and audit committees that does test the question of, are the resources sufficient to deliver what's required? Moving on to page 63 in your pack, there's a greater emphasis in the standards as well on the quality and independence of an internal audit service. There's already a requirement for internal audit services to undergo a periodic external quality review, and at SWAP we had our last one in December of 2024. But the rules around that have been tightened up and have been expanded to include an internal annual self-assessment. So what you should see each year is an accounting from your chief audit executive about how are we ensuring that the work of the quality of our work meets those standards, and what are we doing to continually improve the quality of that work. Also not so relevant for Powys, given the arrangement you have with SWAP, but it tightened up the rules on head of audit independence, asking boards and audit committees to satisfy themselves that where a head of audit has other roles, the arrangements for auditing the work of those other roles is sufficiently independent that you don't lose any quality of assurance in those areas. My previous role in Lewisham, for instance, I oversaw risk management and insurance and health and safety and counter fraud, as well as internal audit. So there were arrangements in my charter for how those areas would be subject to independent audit outside of my direct control. And finally, for the substantive slides there, on page 64 in your pack, there's also a greater emphasis in the standards on coordination with other assurance providers. The relationship that the standards imagine the head of internal audit to have as almost like a gatekeeper for assurance providers isn't really effective in the public sector. There are many regulators, Audit Wales, you've already heard from just one of them, who've got an independent right of access to an authority. So in the context of the public sector, it's in the UK, it's much more about understanding the position and role and work of those regulators and making sure that our work in internal audit is oriented to take what we can in terms of the assurance and minimise the duplication, but understand the limitations and work to deliver assurance where those regulators aren't operating. There's also very much a ongoing development program with the standards. The Global Institute has committed to publishing 3 or 4 topical requirements each year. Cybersecurity is the first one of those in issue, and we'll continually have a program in the Standards Board where we consider the fitness of those particular guidance notes and adapt them as necessary for the UK public sector. And the final thing I'll draw your attention to, and I did check this with Ian first just to make sure I wasn't setting him up for any concerns. Page 67 and 68 is a set of example questions that an audit committee might like to consider asking of its chief audit executive, its head of internal audit, that really speak to what the standards anticipate being the relationship between audit committees and an internal audit service, to make sure that they can work together to deliver the independent, effective insight and assurance into the organisation. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for the invite again. I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Rich, and thank you, Ian, as well. Colleagues, any questions for Rich, please? Or observations? Clive, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rich. Really useful presentation. Thank you very much. But on pages 61 to 64 of the report, there are 6 links to the strategies in other local authorities. I couldn't open them. I wondered if you could arrange for those links to be sent to us. So thank you very much.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, they were clickable on the original PowerPoint I sent. There's probably some magic that happened in the translation of them to a PDF that might have removed that, but I'm very happy for Carrie Ann to circulate the original PowerPoint document that will have them in clickable form.
Thank you, Rich.
Thanks. Any other questions? I've got a couple, but I was seeking any views from colleagues first. I'll go ahead with mine first then. On page 62, page 62, it talks about the internal audit strategy being more than a multi-year plan to fulfill the mandate and support the organisation's strategic goals. And when I read that, and this might not be for Rich and Ian, this might be for officers, it really it brought the importance of sustainable powers to the forefront, particularly the more than a multi-year plan reference. And so what I was curious about when I read the slide on page 62 was really the links between that audit strategy being more than a multi-year plan and how it can best therefore be deployed to support and complement the council's ambitions for sustainable powers. I just wondered if anybody had any comment on that, and it may be that it's officers rather than SWAP colleagues.
I'm happy to start, Chair, if that's okay.
Yes.
I mean, there was in the past that the previous public sector internal audit standard has a requirement for a internal audit strategy. But I think what the IA observed that most people were fulfilling that by just saying, here is our year 1 plan, here's our year 2 plan, here's our 3-year plan. And with the new standards, they're trying to emphasise that actually, no, there's got to be a through line of a strategic vision to this plan for it to be truly a strategic plan. It's not just 3 operational plans stuck together. And so what you ought to see when these standards are fully implemented in our methods next year is you ought to see an articulation in our plan of how we are supporting sustainable powers, to take your example. But how is it that how is the work that we are doing and the work that we are planning across that longer horizon acting to support the organisation to deliver its strategic goals? And that's the sort of thing that you'd expect to appear in an internal audit strategy rather than 3 years projects without any kind of through line about why we have chosen those and excluded others.
Now that's really helpful to have that reiteration, because that's exactly what I think we need to be sort of, when we are examining the strategy and the plan going forward, we really need to be alert to the extent to which it really is supporting the Sustainable Powers agenda, because it is such a profoundly important approach to the council's overall health and wellbeing going forward. Jane?
Yeah, just to reiterate, I mean, that's absolutely critical in terms of the internal audit work, and it's about how it can support us with the change too. You know, the conversations that I have with Ian and other auditors is their work isn't always about internal control and what we're doing on a daily basis and all of those things, but it's also about reviewing how we're making changes and what value they can add to support that as well. So absolutely, all of that is fundamental. It is about the delivery of sustainable powers, but also the delivery of the corporate objectives. And when Ian does his assessment, he considers those factors as part of that work. So absolutely, all of that is fundamental to make sure that the plan aligns with everything that we're trying to do strategically.
No, thank you for that assurance. I think it's something that the committee will need to be particularly alert to as we move into the 26, 27 and thereafter strategic planning period. I was going to bring in John.
You've already covered the point I was going to make. Many thanks.
Thank you. Thanks very much, John. The other point I was going to make was around the independence point that you drew attention to, Rich, and I kind of understand the point you made about where your portfolio had various other areas in your previous role. One of the things that I'm just wondering is how do we maintain and support independence of the audit in a way? I mean, my understanding is that the Audit Wales, our external auditors, they have a rotation of the director and the audit managers who support the various public bodies in Wales. And part of the rationale for that rotation is to ensure that people are able to be objective and that they don't get too familiar with the goings on in a single organisation. And given the swap model, I just wonder how you ensure and continually support Ian. This is about how does swap support Ian to ensure that he has that independence and can maintain that independence given his longevity and depth of experience with the authority.
It's an interesting one because I was an external auditor for many years as well, and that rotational requirement in external audit is part of the independence requirements of the ISAs, which is the external audit standards. But it's expressly not part of the internal audit standards because you've got to weigh up knowing an organisation and understanding an organisation and the strength that brings to the work versus, as you say, being so close to the organisation that sometimes you may risk failing to spot things which would be apparent to someone more coming in more from the outside. And that's a balance, and that's a balance that needs to be struck appropriately for every organisation. At SWAP and with Ian, Ian's obviously part of a larger network of assistant directors, our strategic leadership team, who support one another, who are able to answer questions from one another, who raise questions about my organisation, Somerset Council are doing this, the Powys Council need to do it as well, and so you get that kind of insight. Plus, we are developing much more of a formal, to speak to the quality question on the same slide, much more of a formal QA quality assurance approach that will also be looking to comment on the work of the Powys team from that independent perspective as well, to ensure that it's maintaining the quality and it's got sufficient objectivity in how it views the work of the council, that it can deliver the value of internal audit that we hope to see.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. I think it's important that we just we're all clear about that. And I think what particularly I'm interested in that Ian is supported as best he possibly can be, because as you say, that's the nature of SWAP, to have that peer group support and intelligence network. I think it's extremely important to us that Ian is as well supported as he possibly can be in that environment. Any further questions, please? I was going to just pick up before we close this item down on the page 67 and 68, the questions that Rich drew our attention to, and I'm not proposing that we examine them in any detail today. However, as Rich, as you may know, this Governance and Audit Committee has an internal audit working group. And so with Ian's agreement, I was going to suggest that perhaps the internal audit working group takes a bit more of a closer look at those questions, and just to satisfy ourselves that we are always in the right space. If Ian, if you think that would be useful.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. Excellent idea.
Yeah. Okay, we'll bring that to internal audit working group and not dwell on that level of detail in this particular meeting. So if there are no further questions, I will thank Rich again for his attendance and his presentation, and I'll move back to agenda item 4, which is our regular SWAP progress report on Q1 for 25-26. And I'll hand over to Ian to briefly introduce the paper, and then I'll ask for questions from colleagues. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. As you mentioned, this is our standard Q1 progress report for 25-26. It's item 4. I think it's on page 19 of the pack. I'll briefly run through the headlines. In terms of progress, at the end of Q1, we completed 20% of our annual plan. 35% was either in draft or work in progress, mostly work in progress, but 35% was in work in progress and ongoing, essentially. In terms of outcomes, 57% of the opinion work they've undertaken so far was of positive assurance, so it would be reasonable or substantial. We have made 46 agreed actions, 1 priority 1, 16 priority 2s and 29 priority 3s. In terms of areas of concern, there were no high corporate risks, you'll be glad to hear, but there were 2 limited assurance reports that came out in this period, and one on catering and cleaning in terms of management oversight. The second on commissioning in terms of monitoring and performance, and both of those items are being considered as part of this agenda, so I won't labour on those. In terms of remedial action, at the end of Q1, the Council had implemented 94% of all agreed actions over the last 2 years, which is good. There are 48 that are still due to be implemented, but I suppose the key figure is that 28 are overdue, or were overdue at the end of Q1. But they will be considered by the Internal Audit Working Group, which is meeting with the week in 9 days' time, I think. And finally, the final area is around quality. 97% of our post-audit questionnaires indicated that we've met or exceeded expectations. So those are the headlines. The other thing I'll briefly mention is that we've developed a change management protocol for the audit plan, but this is going to be discussed in item 7, so I won't labour on that either. I'm sure we'll discuss it later. But if members have any questions, I'd gladly try and answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you. I'll open the floor to questions, please. I'll go to Councillor Peat first, please, and then John.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for that, Ian. I just had a couple of questions around the headlines, if I may, which is on page 20 in the pack. The first one is the audit plan progress. So 20% completed in Q1. So just a quick mathematical extrapolation says we're only going to do 80% throughout the year. So I just wanted confirmation there, Ian, that everything's okay to complete all the work. The outcomes then say 57% have provided a positive assurance, and I just wondered about the 43% that didn't, and what the implications of those may be. And then just finally, if I may, Chair, is on the outstanding actions. If I've read that right, there's 6% of actions that haven't been implemented after 2 years. And again, I was just wondering about the impacts of that, because I can't quite see whether they were priorities 1, 2s or 3s, and if there was any reasoning why after 2 years they've not been done. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Pete. Ian?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try and answer those. Please pick me up if I don't. In terms of progress at 20%, and I think there's 35% ongoing, it's always difficult Q1 to be able to give you, a realistic idea of where we are in terms of delivery. But I would say 20% completed and a significant proportion in progress would indicate very much that we are going to be on track to deliver the plan by the end of the year. Obviously, I will keep members and management informed if that position changes, but at the moment I see no reason why we won't meet the delivery of the audit plan. So I think that's where we are. In terms of outcomes, 57%. I think that again, it's quite difficult at the end of Q1. It's quite a small snapshot of the overall year, and we're early in. Normally, we're looking at around about above 70% in terms of that level of positive assurance reports. So I think we just got to keep a watching brief on it. I think the position looks like it's going to be changing for Q2 to be more around where we're expecting, but it is important that as a committee that we make sure that the rolling opinion that I give is realistic. At the moment, I think 1 quarter's work is not enough to indicate that it may not be anything other than reasonable. But by Q2, we're probably getting a bit more data to indicate where we are. And if we're looking at anything other than reasonable, I will certainly raise that to the committee's attention. And then in terms of outstanding actions, again, this was at the end of Q1. We had 28 outstanding. Those 28, I think we probably need, the working group will have more data on those around what they look like and how long they've been outstanding. Certainly, they've not been outstanding for 2 years. So they're outstanding because they've gone beyond the date. I think that what I will try and do in future reports is give you a little bit more information around the level the longevity and the amount of time they've been overdue, to try and give you some kind of proportionality around that. But I think overall 94% implementation is positive, but of the 28, looking at where we are now, we're probably looking at around a similar number, but we are chasing those up ready for the working group next week, and I expect those to improve. But we do, again, we need to keep our eye on that as an organisation. But certainly 28 are not 2 years overdue, just to give you that message and clarity around that.
Thank you, Ian. Pete, is that sufficient for just now? Or do you want to...
Yeah, yes, yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ian. Could I just though come back on this opinions around the control environment, because it may be me not understanding it, Ian, but for 43% to be saying that our control environment is not providing positive assurance, that really seems a high figure for me. That's sort of saying that the control, well, if it really is that, the control environment doesn't sort of sound fit for purpose, or am I just not understanding that correctly?
No, I think your understanding is correct, but what I'm saying is I think we've got such a small data window to make that judgment at the moment that we're talking about seven audits at this stage that have got opinions, and we're normally talking like 40 opinions by the end of the year, which gives me a good balance of work to draw that opinion. I think if it stays at 40% going on, then I think that is an opinion. But I think as we move through the year, I would expect to see something going back to where we are, which is around plus 70%, so less than 30% with adverse opinions, which has been the norm for the authority for probably the last 10 years. So I think we've just got to get a bigger amount of data and that will give us a better opinion going forward.
Oh, if I may, Chair, sorry. Yeah, thanks, Ian. Yeah, perhaps again, it may just be a little bit like what you said about the overdues, is whether there could be sort of like a bit more information around what the actual 43 is to just try and put it in some sort of context. Because when you read that cold, that does just start to ring a few alarm bells, but it may not be as bad as it sounds. Because again, not quite sure what the 7 audits are and how significant those 7 audits are in terms of the topics they're looking at, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if I can just respond to that, I think of the 7 audits, the audit committee will have seen all 7 audits in terms of areas of high concern. So you will have been made aware of all of those issues, and you will have had responses from by the authority. So you will hopefully see those. But I think I guess where I'm based at the moment is that it's just a little bit too early to be going off and suggesting that the council is going to be anything. It's going to be a limited overall annual opinion. I think this is a common pattern sometimes, and so let's wait and see to Q2 and beyond, I would say, to get a more realistic point of where we are.
Thank you, Councillor Pete. Thank you, Ian. Jane, did you want to come in on this point before I go to John and Councillor Chris?
Yes, please. And very briefly, we monitor these routinely through the performance meetings that we hold quarterly at a service level, and some would do that more frequently. You know, I do it regularly with my overall corporate services directorate to keep track on these. Any overdue is not acceptable. But what I would like to point out is we've picked up on this through our corporate leadership team during last year, and really stressed the importance of making sure that people deliver on these actions within the timescales agreed. And I think what you will see is, you know, although that position is being reported at the moment, it's a significant improvement on what we've seen previously. So, you know, holding that line at a corporate level, and particularly with directors through those performance meetings, will ensure that we continue to get better in terms of delivering on those actions in a timely basis.
Thanks, Jane. Thank you very much. John and then Councillor Chris. And I'm going to make Councillor Chris's question the last question on this item, apart from a couple of points from me. John.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. My question is surrounding page 21. I was surprised that 12% of studies are actually in draft form. Is there a particular hold-up with this, Ian, or is this what's the reason for this rather high percentage?
I think in terms of any drafting process, you know, when you go through an audit, it's important to have something that has rigor, to make sure it's fact checked and that there's common understanding between the organisation and the auditors, and that proper action plans are developed. So it's important to have that draft process. Clearly, from our perspective, the more agile that we can be around turning something from draft to final is important, and likewise that it comes to you as a committee. I think, having looked at those ones that were, I think there were 8 in draft at the time. I'm pleased to report that now we are looking at there are only 3 in draft, so 5 of those 8 have been finalised between now and this point. There are, you know, again, it's important to be agile, and we are working with the authority to try and make it as agile as we can be, and we will continue to work. And so I feel that is not a picture you will see throughout the year, that percentage of drafts. I think it's probably a one-off position, but we will try and be as agile as we can.
Thank you, Ian. Keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you very much, John, for the question. Councillor Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ian. I'm just going to turn to, I think it's page 23. You've got a little chart on there saying about the root causes. I just wanted to pick that up a little bit. 2 that spring out about human factor and policies and procedures, systems on there. Have those 172 and 174 issues just arisen within that first quarter? Is that what you're saying? Or is this an accumulation over a period of time that gives you that indication? Because for me, if that is, I then would turn to any of the long-term management actions that haven't been done. Do they relate to issues of human factor? And then we're bringing in issues around training and mandatory training, or issues related to policies and procedures not being reviewed in a timely manner with best practice being brought in? And does that then expose our organisation to undue risk? And are we as an organisation out of kilter with other local authorities on that matter? Or is that something that you see with other organisations as well? And finally, my last point, if I may, there is a box on the root cause saying other, and I just wondered what was in that, because the list is quite comprehensive anyway, but I didn't know what you put in there for the 26 that you'd identified. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris. And Chris has picked up the points I was going to make, so I won't come in again. I'll go to you, Ian, but I would also like one of the senior officers to come in on this point as well. Ian, first.
I think the root cause evaluation is really important, because it goes back to the systemic kind of issues, and a deeper understanding of where the authority lies. I think what it's clear from me to answer Chris's question about is it just quarter one? No, it's not. It's a 2-year rolling plan. So sometimes you'll have an issue or an action in an internal audit. There may be multiple root causes about why we think that's happened. So it's something we've added recently as part of Audit Board, but we've got 2 years worth of data there, and it's there to give that wider picture. In terms of understanding that, if I'm honest, I think what we need to do, and I'll happily take this on board, I think we need to probably deep dive into those root causes to see whether it's a training issue or, so what does it mean? So I'm happy to come back to a future committee and, pick up the 2 main root causes there and come back and give you some extra data, share that with the authority, obviously, and see what it tells us. Let's see what it tells us, and to go from there. And I suppose the last part, are we out of kilter? I don't know is the answer to that, but I will see. We've got some comparative data, and I will see where we lie with other local authorities, and I will come back to you on that, if that's okay, Chair and Councillor Chris.
Thanks very much, Ian. Carrie Ann, could you make a note of that for the forward work plan? And I guess, echoing back to Rich's presentation, that's one of the benefits of being part of SWAP, because Ian should be able to obtain some of that kind of comparative root cause analysis data from colleagues. Jane, if you could come in on this point as well, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I think, governance, compliance and accountability are absolutely critical to any organisation. And the audit regime is what monitors those elements for the organisation. And absolutely, we need to analyse and understand, particularly if there are trends, and highlighting those elements as you have today are absolutely critical to that, because it's important that we learn from that to make sure that we can have the necessary improvements across the board. That is absolutely critical, and particularly as we see our resources squeezed, pressure on staff becomes more so, but we mustn't drop the ball in terms of that governance, compliance and accountability. So it's even more important to keep the organisation safe and our employees and our service users. So absolutely, learning and keeping an eye on these reports and looking at those trends is a vital part of taking our role from a corporate leadership team seriously, and making sure that we pick up on any issues that we need to.
Thanks, Jane. I think we'll leave that there just now, but we will accept Ian's offer to come back with a future paper around root cause analysis and assume on the basis of Jane's comments that that would be a paper that was prepared on a joint basis to help the committee understand and seek assurance that the root cause analysis is being used to improve systems, processes and performance overall. So thank you very much, Ian and Jane and colleagues for that report. I'll move us on to agenda item 5, which is the SWAP internal audit on catering and cleaning. And just to note that we have Kate Ride, Gwilym Davis and Jason Robone in support of this item from the council's team. Just before I hand over to Ian to briefly introduce the paper, I just want to put on record the fact that I'm really disappointed that this report is dated January 2025. And it concerns me that the report is coming to the committee 9 months after its completion. And it would be helpful in the course of the discussion if someone could explain the delay and put on record that we are very uncomfortable with that delay, because it does not help the committee to undertake its role in terms of its constitutional role within the council, and to support the council to examine its internal control framework and assurance mechanisms. So having said that, I'll pass over to Ian to introduce the paper briefly.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. And I think the first thing I need to say is to explain the reason why it's not come to you in a timely manner. It is our fault. It's SWAP's fault. The report was, as you say, was undertaken in January. It had the wrong date on our tracking system in terms of completion, so it showed us till July on the tracking system, and so that's different. Also, there were other factors, but we won't. Essentially, it was our mistake. So I must hold my hands up and say that we are sorry, and we'll make sure that doesn't happen again. It was a genuine mistake, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Ian, for owning that, and I do appreciate you owning that. And before we move on, it just occurred to me, thinking on Councillor Peate's earlier comments. So does that mistake mean that so which annual opinion is this report included in, therefore? The 24/5 or the 25/6 annual opinion?
It will be included in the 25/6 annual opinion.
So well, okay, noted, but that leads me to other curiosities, because had that report been progressed more promptly, it might have featured in the 24/25 opinion in the year in which the audit was actually undertaken.
That is correct. That is correct. That is correct.
Thank you. Noted. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just briefly introduce my colleague Kate Ride, who is a senior auditor with us. She's going to present the next 2 items. Just to say that Kate's currently studying with us at the moment to become a certified internal auditor, and her attendance today is part of that development, the development pathway. So I will hand you over to Kate, who will go through the next 2 reports. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, and thanks, Kate. You're very welcome, and apologies for including you in the council officer cast earlier. That was my error.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. The report for this is on page 31 of the agenda packs. I will assume you've all had a chance to read the report, so I will focus on the key findings. This audit examined the oversight and governance within the cleaning and catering services. The assurance rating was limited, and we've made 8 recommendations. Overall, the audit found that monthly management meetings provided oversight across both teams. Discussions covered issues, sicknesses, vacancies, risk assessments, tenders, and training arrangements. Improvements were needed to ensure that budgets and income were regularly discussed. However, it was confirmed that monthly financial advisors meetings took place. The audit recommended that management meetings included more details about the discussions officers had. The audit was unable to confirm whether a formal business plan was in place at the time of the audit. However, it was acknowledged that the plan may have been incorporated into a broader plan, particularly following the Council's restructuring in April 2024. A draft plan was noted to be in development in January 2025. Risk registers were in place for the service, but as a minor weakness, it was identified that not all risks may have been captured. The service may have benefited from considering health and safety issues, including potential food-related illnesses. The audit found that the service still used paper forms to collect data, which slowed down how quickly information reached senior managers. Some issues were also passed down verbally. The process could have caused delays, especially since staff are spread all across different locations in the county. The audit suggested switching to electronic methods like digital questionnaires to make things quicker and clearer. The service is working on introducing tablets to help with this, and Jason will explain more on that later. There was a change in management towards the end of the audit, with the senior manager returning from secondment. The report was well received, and the service responded by creating an action plan. Follow-up checks have shown good progress in addressing the issues raised. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you very much, Kate. Does anyone have any questions specifically for Kate before we move on to officer's response? Pete and then Graham, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, and yes, thank you, Kate, for summarising the report so well. So thank you very much for that. I guess as well, part of what I'm going to say may be linked to your opening comments, Chair, which I echo around the time of the report being tabled to this committee. But I do know Ian's response and his apology. What I'm trying to understand, and again, it may be the timing thing, is at a recent economy, residents and committees scrutiny meeting, we had a Q1 report around the Economic Development and Growth Directorate, which picked up on food standards, hygienes, inspections and interventions. Now, there was a lot of information in that report that we saw where we were badly off target, off track against our targets. And the best was a 41%, and the worst was 0.4% against a target of 100%. So for me, when I've seen that information and compare that to this report, I feel that the risk assessment in this report should be much higher than medium. It should be the highest category, because that report that I've just recently seen at ERC sort of seems to be telling me that there's something in there that's not quite right. So I guess in a way, Chair, where I'm clumsily trying to get to is that due to the timing? Has the situation really got worse? And what is the link between this report and that Q1 data that we've seen?
Thank you very much, Councillor Pete. Thank you. I can see Gwilym's got his hand up. So before I go to Councillor Graham, I'm assuming, Gwilym, you want to come in to address the point that Councillor Pete is making.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to that report's related to the Environmental Health Service and in relation to their requirements to inspect premises in relation to food hygiene. Now, within that report, we highlighted the performance in relation to risk categories, categories A to E, with the annual targets for A to D being 100% has to be done in line with the programme. And then for category E, which is the lowest risk premises, 2% to be undertaken in line with the programme. Now, because annual figures were provided, there's a lot of red within reports, but I just want to give assurance that in relation to category A to D, which are the highest risk, A was 25%, which is on track. B was 28%, which is actually better than what was the quarterly figures were. C was below 23.54%, which should have been 25%, but and D was 41%, And our annual target for that is 100% by the end of the year. So, and E was 0.4%, which is still slightly below target, but very close to where it should be on that Q1. So it was a mistake for us to put annual targets versus our Q1 figures that made it look bad, but it's environmental health figures, not the catering and cleaning figures that relates to, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. And Pete, is that sufficient answer? I think there's a lesson in clarity of what the data is saying.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, and thank you for that, Gwilym. Yeah, I agree with you, Chair. I think we touched upon it earlier. It's having some context around the data that we're seeing and understanding as well, risk mitigations and things like that. So thank you for the clarity.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pete, and thank you, Gwilym. Councillor Graham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not sure whether I'm jumping the gun here. Are we able to go into specifics that are within the report at this stage? Or are the officers going to present more?
No, Councillor Pete,
No,
ask
okay.
your question, and if we need to bring
Okay.
in officers to answer the question, we will do so.
Okay, well, obviously it is disappointing, and I'm sure other councillors are going to come in on the facts that, you know, there's no business. The report shows that there was no business plan, and we've been far too slow moving across to digital systems. But I'm picking out one of the specifics in here around hygiene standards, and why we would accept a KPI for us to achieve of a 4 rating in our establishments and not a 5. You know, surely if Powys can't achieve the highest standards, how can we expect establishments and businesses in the commercial world in Powys to do so? And are we saying we're prepared to accept second best? If that's the case, should we, as the local authority, not be setting the example? It'd be interesting to know how many of our establishments are actually achieving a 4 or above, and what percentage that is, really. Because in my experience, you know, if you set people targets that are below the best, they will achieve just that. And that's worrying if we're accepting that level within Powys. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Graham. I'll look to officers to address Councillor Graham's specific point about and question about the ratings, but also to make any broader and more general comments that they wish to make on their overall response to the audit, please. Gwilym, are you going to lead on that?
If possible, thank you, Chair. In relation to the business plan, the council undertook a restructure of the senior leadership team, and that was implemented in 2024. So when catering came under me, we did work on the integrated business plan. And I have to reassure councillors, we've got a business plan in place. It's been adopted. It's been signed off by the portfolio holder in relation to catering and cleaning. So we have got that business plan. Now, in the past, there was different standards, but I can assure Councillor Breeze, we've now got a KPI that requires 5 or reports in relation to how many premises we've got at a rating of 5, which is the higher standard. And I agree with you, we should be looking for the higher standard for our premises. Now, out of all the premises that we've got, 75 premises are at rating 5. We've got 16 at rating 4, and then we've got 2 below that. And those 2 have got action plans in place to make sure that we do drive it so that they are within the category rating of 5, which is very good. And at worst, category 4, which is defined as good. So that KPI has been changed and is rating 5 in line with the standards that we should expect for the council. With regard to digital, again, when we came in, it is quite clear that the service wanted investment into ICT to make sure that we can work rather than relying upon actually transport letters and things like that being sent. We needed ICT so that correspondence go from management to catering and cleaning premises and be answered straight away. So we have secured investment in digital, in tablets, which was previously, I believe, mentioned, and that will really help drive forward communication in relation to health and safety training, and also provide better leadership, in my opinion, people being more accessible so we can talk to people straight immediately. And that's really going to be a massive progress. But I have to say, it is still a work in progress in that vein. And Jason's currently rolling out some of the iPads after a trial this month. It should be all complete. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Willem. Did you want to add something to that, Jason?
I was just going to come in, Chair. Thank you, Borodar, everyone. My name is Jason Morgan. I'm the principal professional lead, for catering and cleaning for Powys. And as Kate mentioned, and I'd like to thank Kate and Ian and the SWAP audit team for doing the report and giving us some advice and guidance on where we can sort of fill in the gaps and improve our service in certain areas. But if you'd like me to go through each individual item on the report, or I can take individual questions from members.
I think, Jason, we'll focus on questions and assume that colleagues have read the report and are satisfied with what it says, unless they pose you particular questions. No need to go through it item by item. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
I'll just come back, Chair. Just in support, really, what you said earlier. A lot of what Gwilym has told us there, if this report had come out, was accurate in its dateline, a lot of these conversations wouldn't be taking place probably. So I think that really exposes the need to get reports out on time and not dated January when we're receiving them in September.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm trusting that SWAP and officers have taken our point on, not least the point about which opinion these reports actually inform. I'll go to Councillor William and make Councillor William's question the last on this item, if I may.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Kate for summarising and speaking to the report so clearly. I'm particularly I'm reassured by Gwilym's comments in relation and in response to Councillor Graham's concerns, which overlap quite a bit with concerns that I had. However, just a couple of things that I had cause to reflect on. The one was in relation to the third point there in relation to risk registers amongst the list of key conclusions, with the reflection that we could benefit from considering more deeply health and safety matters around potential food-related illnesses. I really think that we need to have that writ large, because I mean these in extreme situations can be life and death situations. You look at things around nut allergies and contaminants of various kinds. I think this is something that really needs to be very high in our risk register and building that into our practice. The other thing that occurred to me earlier was in relation to the moving to digital reporting, iPads and so on from the kitchen setting, feeding back into management. Clearly, there's an important benefit there in terms of consistency, speed, efficiency. But there was a reference to the fact that managers previously were attending kitchens in order to sort of receive this information. I think it's also important that we don't go too far in the other direction, because clearly when you have a situation where supervisors are visiting these more remote locations, there is also that benefit on a risk basis to actually having that physical presence as well. So I think it's important that we have a balanced approach there, because there are sometimes things that can be picked up through physical presence that one wouldn't receive if an email update just drops into your email box as a manager routinely. And I think therefore we just need to be cognizant of the fact that clearly you have to move towards efficiency, but on the other hand you also need to know what is happening on the ground. And I think sometimes we might lose that in the drive towards digital efficiency. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor William. I've got 3 hands. I've got Jason, Gwilym and Councillor Rafe. We do need to move on, but what I was proposing to do is go to Jason and Gwilym and then to give Councillor Rafe the last word on this item as the, I'm just swishing a flyaway, sorry, as the portfolio holder. Yeah, is everyone content if I do that? Right, Gwilym and Jason to address the issues, and then I'll give the final word to Councillor Rafe.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to health and safety, one of the actions in the integrated business plan is for a full review of the health and safety risks of the catering and cleaning service. And we're working with health and safety colleagues now to undertake that risk assessment of the risk assessments in place. But we're also very dynamic in relation to the risks. For example, if a specific risk in relation to health and safety comes in, then we will put that on the risk register, which is shown, for example, when we got asbestos now in the risk register, which we're addressing via an appropriate action plan, and Jason and the team are fully taking part in that. In relation to digital, I understand your concerns there, Councillor Powell. We have now got all documents being reported electronically from our environmental health officer when they do the reports, sending it directly to myself as well as the service area, so that we can address concerns appropriately. But we have got supervisors still visiting the sites to make sure that they make sure that the standards are appropriately held there, and people are held accountable, and making sure everything is appropriately adopted, because you can have the best risk assessments in place, but if people aren't complying with them, then that's a different thing, isn't it? So we have got that physical presence there, and we will maintain that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Jason, do you wish to add anything, please?
Just briefly, Chair, thank you. I was just going to add, in terms of the food safety, all of our teams are continually on a rotation programme around. All of the catering staff have undergone food safety training and continue to do so. Every time that's up for renewal, we have a spreadsheet that alerts us to when they're due for renewal, and we appropriately log them on to the next training course. So there's sort of overlap, if you like, so they're continually trained. The other thing is they also have a lot of training on dietary requirements and allergies, so they're all fully compliant with. There's over 700 at the moment different diets that are carried out in our schools across Powys, ranging from lactose intolerant to nut allergy. So they're fully conversant in terms of what they need to provide in terms of making those learners safe in the schools, in terms of the food that they're provided with. And yes, just to reiterate Gwilym's comment there, the integration with digital tablets into these sites won't sort of take out the essential support staff going out and seeing with boots on the ground to see what the staff are doing and making sure that they're carrying out processes and procedures correctly. That will still continue.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kate, for the report, and Gwilym and Jason for supporting the discussion. I'll give the last word on this to Councillor Rafe. Councillor Rafe.
That's very kind of you. Thank you very much, Chair. So I just want to take the opportunity to assure members that following my appointment as portfolio holder earlier this year in May, service improvement, many of which have been identified in the report, is an absolute priority of mine. And obviously, we note the time that it has taken for this report to come to the committee, but it is the case that most of those improvements have already been undertaken and are in progress of being implemented. And so in addition to the quarterly performance and evaluation meetings that I have with the department, I do meet monthly with the head of the service and the senior managers, including additional meetings when other issues arise. And during those meetings, we continually review the integrated business plan, which is now in place and signed by myself, in addition to reviewing the JCAD risk platform, which details the service risks and how they're being managed. So I look forward to bringing to you in the next few months some more good news on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rafe, and thanks everyone. The committee notes the report and is grateful for the discussion that we were able to have. So we will move on to the second internal audit report under agenda item 6, which is the internal audit report on commissioning, monitoring and performance. Ian, if you could briefly introduce this report, or will I go straight to Kate?
I think go straight to Kate,
Yeah.
Chair.
Yeah, apologies. I'll go straight to Kate, and then Sharon is lead for the officers on this one. Kate.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, I will assume you've all had a chance to read the audit report, so I will go through the key findings. The audit examined performance and monitoring within adult commissioning services. The assurance rating was limited, and we made 6 recommendations. The Council has a contract management framework that gives general guidance on how contracts should be managed. However, the Adults Commissioning Service needs clearer processes and criteria for monitoring contracts day to day. Whilst different projects may need different approaches, the Council still needs to make sure its processes help ensure that commissioning services meet performance expectations. The audit showed that there was evidence that the services were monitoring projects' performance, and we did see good practice in some areas. However, the approaches were fragmented. A more coordinated and streamlined process would help improve visibility into both commission services and contractor performance. Whilst we acknowledge that a fully standardised approach may not be feasible due to different projects, we recommend aligning them where possible to ensure support resources can be shared. Our review found that financial costs and risk were monitored. Enhancing visibility over the overall contractor performance would ensure the Council receives value for money and services paid for. This enhanced oversight could help identify issues early and keep senior management informed of commissioning performances. In summary, the audit highlights the need for clearer processes, better coordination, and stronger oversight to support effective performance and monitoring in adult commissioning services. Following the receipt of the report, the services created an action plan. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Sharon first to respond, and then I'll open the floor for questions. Sharon.
Thank you, Chair. Borodar Pawb. As Kate has said, we do have an action plan that's been developed. A working group has been established to identify all actions needed to rectify the key findings. And I believe we'll take questions instead of me responding to each point. There was one action and one finding that was actioned with a priority of 1, and I can assure that that action of creating the RAG report and bringing all the contracts into one place has been achieved, but I can answer that through questions.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I've been going to follow up that priority 1. So thank you for your assurance that that's well in hand and has been concluded. Thank you. Thanks very much. Any further questions on this report to Kate or to Sharon? I'm pausing. Nope. Yeah. Yes, Chris. Councillor Chris. Chris,
I thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, probably with Kate first of all, is what was the basis of you said it was a fragmented service. What were the components that you picked up that you saw as fragmented? And do you then have any good examples or good practice from other organisations that you've reviewed that would be helpful for the team to consider in addressing some of those action points? And then the other question then is probably more for the internal on it is, was this on your horizon? Were you aware that we had this fragmentation, and how was that being addressed, or has it only been picked up since we've done the internal audit? Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Sharon? Oh, sorry. Kate, those questions were for Kate, weren't they?
Kate and Sean with the latter one, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
So Kate first, then Sharon.
Yeah. So with fragmented, I would say that perhaps different projects were using different approaches. So we had some using questionnaires, some using verbal form phone calls, and others using forms. with a good approach, I think we did one project had a very good method of how they were monitoring. So they had Microsoft forms that went out that fed into a dashboard, but that approach was only used for one project, whereas other projects seem to be doing different questionnaires or different methods of like monitoring. And I suppose that's what I probably meant by fragmented. They probably work together, but and I suppose the other thing would be documents were sort of held within the individual project teams, whereas if you had an overall management process sort of thing, it would bring it all together. So for Nina and Sharon could have a one view look of this was what was wrong.
Okay. So can I just follow up then? So is that in relation to a skill set of the individuals within the team? Because some people feel more comfortable in, say, developing a form or a questionnaire rather than dealing, say, with an IT form and dealing with that. So again, if I come back to when I asked about root causes, some of that was around the human factor, and some of that identifies to skill sets. So I think there's a commonality and a theme being pulled through there, in my view.
And perhaps a training issue to go with that,
Yeah,
Chris?
yeah. That there is a theme here.
Yes, a standardisation of approach and the training and development to go with it. Sharon?
Yes, just to answer that, come back on those points, Councillor Chris, and then I'll answer your secondary question. I think fragmentation is natural within the team because the team itself is split into two separate functions. One of Age Well, which is the older adults, and one is Live Well, which is working age adults. Although they're one team, they are separated, and the different funding streams often require different compliance and methodology. But we are saying that I think we absolutely recognise the need for consistency, and in doing so, we have established one centralised SharePoint site. We're in the process of transferring all of the records over to that. That SharePoint site will contain the reviewed and amended and updated guidance needed for the contract management framework. It'll also include standardized templates, and it will also include monitoring reports and our dashboard. So we've got a new dashboard that's in test at the moment, but that will give us an overview of every provider's performance, so that we have that oversight at our fingertips. We've consolidated the KPIs, and Kate alluded to it. Some of the funded streams do require different KPIs, but we've got a consolidated list of standardized KPIs that will focus on performance as well as finance. They'll focus on elements such as CIW standards, regulatory standards, feedback, safeguarding, those key performance areas linked to specific contracts and the contract monitoring data, and all of that will be available in the dashboard. And we're also working now with IT to develop an AI bot that will be able to retrieve and compare the data from providers and provide assurance, but also timely escalation on any issues that are emerging. The secondary question was around, were we aware? We were aware. I don't think we were aware to the extent of the differences, and we had been having some conversations around what we needed to do to bring the contract monitoring function to centralise it, and instead of it being separated across the two different teams. And we're looking at that through our restructure that we're currently undertaking in that area.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Thanks, Councillor Chris, for your questions, and thanks, Sharon. Chris, do you want to? Come back in for?
If I may, it just picks up on the previous point about root cause. One of the other elements of that was about policies, procedures, and systems, and whilst I accept and take on board that teams will be in different places and there will be different funding streams coming in, they will require their own separate KPIs. We are one organisation and we should have the same system coming through. There's other items on the agenda which are around systems and processes, and it's one of my things that I do look at, and I do have concerns when we have separated systems if it's not being able to be communicated. So there were some reassurances there, but I want to see how this pans out. And we did mention before that we would look at some of the root causes and do a deep dive on there. And I think some of the lessons learned then would be helpful to the teams going forward. So I think there's positives to come out from it. So that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I think your comments are very, very well made. Standardization can be beneficial for whole range of reasons. Policy, procedures, safety, health and safety, safeguarding, value for money, the whole raft. Sharon, I'm going to bring you in, and Gareth, I can see your hand, Sharon. It just strikes me as though you've got a huge opportunity here, and it sounds as though you're definitely grasping the opportunity and moving forward to improve things on that basis. But I'll bring Gareth in, and that'll be the last question on this topic.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, mine's a general point arising from this report and the previous internal audit report. And the internal audit report sets out actions for officers and a timescale. And that's the sort of headline actions that have been agreed. But from what I've gathered, that leads to more detailed action plans being devised and sometimes working groups being set up. And I think there's a read across to the regulatory tracker, because the timescales put in the internal audit reports are not the final date set for the implementation of any action plan or working group. And we can understand that devising processes and procuring handheld devices, training, testing, all of that. So what is the link between the dates in the internal audit reports and the actual dates these actions are finally fully implemented? And I don't think they coincide. And should there be a drop dead date to give some focus, particularly around priority actions? And I should assume, I must assume, but it's nice to be confirmed, that the internal audit team monitor the progress of the regulatory tracker against these actions.
Thank you, Gareth. I don't think we've got time for a very detailed discussion on this, but Gareth raises an extremely important point. So I'm going to ask Catherine James, if she's with us, just to make a comment in terms of her leadership of the regulatory tracker and data, and ask Ian to make a brief comment. And then, subject to that, it may be that we ask for further assurance going forward, and that Gareth's point is noted as an action going forward for further assurance. But I will give Catherine and Ian a brief opportunity to comment now.
Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of the regulatory tracker, obviously we'll be talking about it later on a separate item, but that obviously tracks our response to the reports that we've had from external regulators. And they obviously come to yourselves, to Governance and Audit Committee. So the tracker is a Power BI report that is available to all officers in, within the senior leadership team, and obviously Governance and Audit Committee members. And the dates on the tracker are those that we do submit back to the regulator and yourselves.
Thanks, Catherine. I think, Gareth, your point is, are all the dates basically coming together in a coherent way, and do we have a drop dead? Ian, do you wish to make any comment on this at the moment? I think you might be on mute, Ian.
Sorry, Chair. Certainly, the dates that we would more likely use in an audit report are sometimes the dates that can be the start of the journey, so that this group is created and it's that start point. So maybe we can think about adding something in the internal audit report to show the completion date as well. So a start and completion date, and we can go from there. In terms of the tracking, we do through the tracker monitor not just the start, but we also monitor the delivery through the tracking process that we have. So we do make sure that it gets the end date. But sometimes you'll see, we spoke about the 28 overdue today. Sometimes the implementation date is the start date, and that can take several years to go through. And sometimes things look overdue, even though they're not. It's because the due date was the start of the process and not the end. So maybe we can think about completion and try and give you some better information around that, I would say.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful, Ian, if Ian and Catherine could perhaps have a conversation to ensure that there's a kind of clearer indication of what dates actually mean when they're there, and that we do have a clear trajectory to the fulfilment of recommendations and actions. But we'll leave that for just now, but we'll record it, please, Carrie Ann, as an action.
Thanks.
I'm going to move us on to item 7, which is the internal audit change management protocol. Ian, if you could just briefly introduce the paper and assume that everyone has read it.
I will. Thank you, Chair. Just briefly do it. I mean, changes occurred to the plan, and there are many reasons why that may be. It could be unavailability of the client through sickness or leave or other work pressures. Likewise, it could be the unavailability of the auditor, so that's similar. Or there may be new or unforeseen work or requests or grants, things coming in. So change happens in terms of the planning process. But I think, committee have been requesting, and rightly so, that we have more formality about that change process. So we developed this process a protocol to ensure that the changes are transparent, documented and approved. And that applies to all changes, whether they're initiated by me as the head of audit or management or the governance and audit committee. Briefly, the protocol outlines the responsibilities of the key players in there. Minor ones will be then approved and done by myself. Significant changes will be approved by the council, the head of the 151 officer or the deputy 151 officer, and we will notify the chair and vice as they happen, but also then put that in our quarterly report to say what those changes may be. So if members have any questions, certainly it's not a, whilst I've developed it, it's the council's protocol. It's not necessarily SWAP's protocol, but there we are. Okay,
No,
thank you.
Absolutely, and thanks very much, Ian. I mean, from my perspective, I think it provides a very sensible and helpful framework for changes and decision making. So I'm very supportive of it. If anyone has any brief questions. If there are no questions or points of detail, I think the committee can note the protocol, note and welcome the protocol. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ian, and officers for addressing that. Thank you. We'll move on to corporate items, and we'll take agenda item 9, which is our regular quarterly Treasury Management Report, and I'll look to James to briefly introduce the paper on the basis that he should assume that colleagues have read the report. Thanks, James.
Yeah, good morning, members. I'm Jim Chappell. I'm the Chief Accountant for the Council. This is the, as you're aware, the usual quarterly Treasury Management report setting out the Treasury management activities in the quarter ending the 30th of June 2025. So as you can see, the report's got what we've done borrowing wise, capital updates and updates on the sundry debt and the VAT KPIs as usual. I don't think I've got anything to go into more detail than that, as you've all read the report. So thank you.
Thanks very much, James. I'll open the floor to questions from members, please. Councillor Peat.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question relates to page 80 in the pack, which is paragraph 3.12.2 in the report. It talks in there about self-catering units and a large amount of council tax not being collected, as many of these self-catering units are appealing the decision to move from business rates to council tax with the valuation office. So I guess my question is if that appeal is successful, what would be the implications on our budget?
Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Councillor Pete. And James, I was quite curious about that section as well, just in terms of the is Powys typical across Wales? What are other authorities experiencing? Yeah, thought that was quite an interesting space. James or Jane, will I come to you?
Yeah, I'll start. Mary may want to come in, but this is a change that we've seen implemented by Welsh Government a little while ago, but I think there's been a bit of catch up in terms of the assessments being undertaken by the Valuation Office. And what we're now seeing is very many of those self-catering units that used to be have liabilities under the business rate scheme now dropping into council tax. And of course, when they drop into council tax, based on our policy here in our council, they attract a premium. So this assessment has gone back a couple of years, and what we've seen is some of those businesses have been hit, as it says in the report, by council tax bills now that exceed, they can be tens of thousands for some, particularly if they have more than one unit. So we didn't know how many of these were likely to fall into council tax for this particular year. So we wouldn't have budgeted necessarily for all of the income that's potentially going to come through into our budget at that point in time. And we will have to amend our council tax base and everything based on when we get that information and get it approved through an annual basis. So that council tax base will be recalculated now in the autumn and approved through the usual mechanisms. So the fact that we didn't foresee an increase in income means it won't have a fundamental impact on our budget. However, in terms of working with these organisations, we are obviously talking to them. We're suggesting they put payment plans in place even while they're going through the appeals process, so they can start to pay down some of that potential debt. We're also very mindful, although we've got these liabilities now raised, if they have through the appeal process be amended, that could see a significant reduction obviously in what we're going to get through. So we're keeping all of this under review at the moment, but it is not going to have a detrimental impact on our budget as it currently stands for the current financial year.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks, Councillor Pete. I'm going to go to John and then Gareth Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Just trying to come on. Yeah. My question really is to Jane here. You will recall, Jane, that years ago when I was on the finance panel, we looked at finance costs of financing the debt. And we were talking about figures, sort of 5-6% would be sort of warning limits, and we start getting twitchy about that level. I see on the table in 3.8.2 that we're talking about levels coming up to 5% by 27 by next year even, but certainly by 27-28. And I'm concerned then that looking back at the previous page, if we have a look at the debt maturity profile, we've got a lot of debt, short-term debt, and I totally understand why it's there. But there's an awful lot of it is going to have to be refinanced over the course of the next, a very large chunk over the course of the next 6 to 9 months, and certainly over the course of the next 2 years. what impact, when we refinance, I presume that we're likely to have to incur higher interest rates. And what do you think is the impact on the figures in the table on 3.8.2? Has the full impact of that been taken into account, or have we got more bad news to come?
Shall I come in, respond, Chair? And James, actually, I'll let James go first and I'll come in with anything that he fails to cover. Thank you, James.
James, all yours.
Yes, that is, we are getting to that sort of 5% level, that, or the forecasts are that 5% level is where we need to take action. Currently, we are still renewing that short-term debt at lower rates than the short-term debt we had 12 months ago. So that is still happening, and it's still happened. And I think we're in a point this year that we've renewed as much as we need to renew. There may be a little bit more we need to take towards the end of the year. But all of that has been done at lower rates than the debt that has matured. But again, it's been again at 12 months rather than, or 12 months or some 2 year we've taken out to spread the risk, because any longer term borrowing, 10, 15, 20 years or 50 years, is at least 2% higher than what we're getting in that short term one. We are remaining within the prudential indicators we set of the maturity profile that is in the capital and treasury management strategy. I need to, in light of the borrowing I've taken out, and we may be fortunate that actually we may end the year with slightly less debt than we started it with. That's a bit of a caveat. We're not even halfway through the year, but it's looking fairly positive at this point of time that we certainly won't have much of an increase in debt. It may be slightly lower at the end, 31st of March, but I do need for the next report to do a new forecast going forward, which will help the budget setting. I do expect those financing cost figures to be, well, at least the level of debt we need will be less. Whether the rates that when we get our forecasts from Link and MUFG Corporate Markets, we'll work that through. But we won't need the level of debt that we've got, or there won't be the level of debt there. Just the forecast for the interest rates. We would like to lock in some longer term rates, but as I say, it doesn't seem to be the right time to do that yet, and that is what the Treasury advisors are telling us. And I think you'll find it a bit more in the members' treasury management session, which is with Richard from Link next Friday, isn't it?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. Jane, you wanting to add to that?
Just a little, Chair, if I may. I mean, the balance in terms of what we invest in and our borrowing limits and the impact that has on our revenue budget are obviously fundamental to our financial planning. And you're correct in terms of that percentage is a key indicator for us to look at that. It's not always as straightforward as it may seem on face value, because obviously we need certain assets to be able to deliver our services. So we have to work all of that through. But this is why rationalising our assets across the council is a fundamental element of our strategy. Because there will be a point where we will not be able to afford to invest in everything that we may wish to. So that capital financing strategy and our overarching financial plan has to consider that, and we have to think about how we prioritize any investment and what are the things that make the greatest impact for our residents and our economy across Powys. So that is a big question that we will further have further debate on as we come to set our next year's budget and our ongoing 5-year plan. But capital receipts are a big element here. Hence the reason for setting a £10 million capital receipt target as part of our strategy, because that obviously enables us to keep those borrowing down to affordable levels. So a big debate to be had, I think, in terms of where that investment falls over the next a few years across the council.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jean, and thanks very much, James, for your comprehensive answers. Gareth?
Yeah, my question is relates to para 331 and the capital programme and additional grants from the Welsh Government. Just to get a bit more clarity, is this, I know that with, for example, with the schools programme, the council's bid for extra cash from Welsh Government because of additional or exceptional environmental requirements of particular sites and buildings. So the question is, are these additional grants truly additional? Are they reducing the council's expenditure because it's coming from another party, or is it are these grants filling any gaps in any budget overspend, or is it a mixture of both, or is it totally new money where the Welsh Government devises new grant schemes and you've got projects which are eligible for them and you bid for them and they're successful?
Thanks, Gareth.
James, do you want to
Yeah,
start?
there's a bit of a mixture going on, Gareth. We've had quite a number of new schemes this year. So the Welsh Government have done their LGBI, Local Government Borrowing Initiative, which they're funding the borrowing for quite a substantial investment on the highways network, which will speed up what the council was planning to do. But with the extra funding, I think we'll be able to do it sooner than we planned. There's a few other things with the levelling up funding for highways for those schemes. They're on top of what we wouldn't normally have done. With the schools, we do factor in the level of grants for the schemes, but until we get to the tender cost, we're never quite sure exactly what we get. But we do try and recover as much as possible, and I think you saw that with Matt Curtis in the working group a few weeks ago. So it's a bit of a mixture. The grant schemes generally tend to be for bespoke stuff rather than replacing our planned spend, but we do get grants towards the end of the year, which we, in order to utilise them, we will swap funding and reduce as borrowing and capital resources as much as possible.
So that's why you keep spending your money to the last. You exhaust all the other potential or actual sources.
Yeah, a bit like that, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, it is exactly that, isn't it? We want to limit our spend as much as possible and use anything else coming our way first to help us manage our resources effectively and prudently.
Good. Thanks.
Thanks, Gareth, for the question. Thanks, Jane and James, for those answers. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, and we will note the report. I'll move us on to item 10, which is a corporate safeguarding report, which Sharon, you're going to lead on this in Nina's absence. So if you could just briefly introduce the report. Assume, Sharon, that everyone's read the report, or I've got my eye on the clock a wee bit. I don't want to inappropriately foreshorten any discussion, but equally assume people have read the report, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. So the report on the agenda is the update on the Corporate Safeguarding Board meeting that was held on the 12th of June. It's not an exhaustive report nor the minutes, and it's just a briefing note given to yourselves and other committees. At the meeting, we welcomed colleagues from SWAP and noted the forthcoming audit on safeguarding of volunteers and discussed the scope and engagement of services. The board discussed the corporate safeguarding policy, and a working group agreed to review and bring a refreshed policy to the board before December. Updates and discussion were had on the Regional Safeguarding Board and the preparations for National Safeguarding Week at the end of the year. The annual private fostering report was presented, noting there are no current arrangements registered in Powys. The challenges was received and around more proactive approach to raising awareness. There was an update received on the JICPA action plan, and the board noted the progress being made and agreed that remaining actions to be monitored through business as usual governance. Service updates were received from each of the services, and the mandatory training, safeguarding and thematic review of adult practice reviews were updated, and the next meeting is scheduled for the 11th of September. So that's a whistle-stop tour.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sharon. Are there any questions, please, for Sharon? No questions? Chris. Oh, yeah, Chris, Councillor Chris. I was anticipating you. Yeah, please, Councillor Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sharon, presenting this element of the report. I was going to bring up about the mandatory training, which is 2.9.1. It had indicated that it was 93% compliance for the violence against women and domestic abuse, etc. And 61.1% for schools. I was seeing that hadn't changed since the last report. But in our minutes on page 15, there was a section because I'd raised some questions there around on it, and the compliance at that stage was 96.6. So there's actually been a drop compared to that on there. But then I was thinking, am I doing them a disservice because there would have been the school break and because the school side hasn't moved from 61.6. So I'm going to hold fire on that one, but it's really on my radar that there needs to be a consistency in trying to get mandatory training done, because it goes back to the point I raised over root causes. If we're not training people, then people start to become complacent and slip through the gap. And the teams here do such a fabulous job of protecting vulnerable people. It's really important that we have the skills and they have the knowledge base to be able to do that. In relation to the paper, there's a couple of things that sprung out to me. One was about this new neglect toolkit. Just wanted to understand a bit more. That's on page 94 under 2.6.3. Can we just have a brief overview of what is that about? Because usually neglect sits under child protection, and child protection is quite enhanced in relation to the assessment process. But is this a way of trying to keep children with families but out of the care system? Because obviously when they come into us, that's where we then start to incur more issues and more supervision of those families on there. And that, so I'll stop at that point there.
Thank you very much, Chris. Sarah, you wanted to come in. Was that an answer to Chris's first question?
Yes, certainly, around the mandatory training and the voucher SV, Chair.
Okay, we'll deal with that, and then I'll go to Sharon for the neglect tool point. Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, so just to give some assurance, I can say that as of the 1st of September, the voucher SV compliance rate for schools was 70.2%. I think I've mentioned previously that there have been some difficulties in respect of how the actual training is pulling through to the system. So I've actually been discussing with 2 schools this week, identifying a couple of staff that haven't pulled through. And I think I've also previously mentioned the development of the mandatory training dashboard for schools. That's in its final few days of setup. I won't bore everybody with some very technical behind the scenes information, but just to say that we've got some schools ready to test that already, and we're hoping that that live information will enable schools to identify very quickly where they know that their staff have done the training, they can see the certificates, and then we can support corporately to make sure that that's pulling through if there's an issue. So there's been a raise in the compliance rate, as well as we're very close to that completion of that dashboard for monitoring.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. Sharon, on the neglect tool question.
Yes, yes, Councillor Chris, it is exactly as you assumed. It is a toolkit that is to avoid that escalation and is preventative in its essence. So it's been developed by Children's Services with and to support partners as a multi-agency toolkit. And it includes various assessment tools, including the home conditions assessment and a suite of a day in my life tools, which are focused on age-specific children and young people. people, but it's to support that consistent evidence-based assessment practice, which is focused on the child and the child remaining at home and avoiding that escalation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Are there any further questions on the safeguarding report, please? Thank you very much. Thanks, Sharon, and thanks, Sarah. The committee welcomes and notes the report. So thank you very much, both. We'll move to agenda item 11, the regulatory tracker report, and welcome Catherine. Catherine, again, assume everyone has examined this already. If you would just briefly introduce the paper.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is the regulatory tracker update for Q1, which is April to June of this year. So for ease, an extract of the regulatory tracker has been included in the pack, starting on page 105, and that is taken from our interactive report that all of governance and audit have access to. It tracks the recommendations that we do have with our external regulators and how progress is being made against those. So in summary then, we've got 41 recommendations that were listed on the tracker as at the end of Q1, and that includes both open and those items that were closed during the quarter. 8 new recommendations were received in Q1. 5 of these were issued by Audit Wales, 2 from Care Inspectorate Wales and 1 from the Information Commissioner. 24 recommendations do remain open at that point in time, and 18 were on track and 6 off track. And they were 1 from Audit Wales, 2 from the Information Commissioner and 3 from the Food Standards Agency. And finally, 17 recommendations were completed during Q1. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Any questions, please? Catherine, could you say a wee bit more, please, about the 6 that are off track?
Yes.
It's really just it's as much a qualitative excuse me, a qualitative question as a quantitative question. You know, what sort of thing? Just give us a
so the 6 off track. So one of them related to an audit from Audit Wales, and it was about net zero ambition and the council needing to have fully costed plans. So obviously that is within the economy and climate area. We did have an update against that one, which said that we do have a programme manager that's been recruited to help deliver that, but obviously that's all I have. I don't know if anyone from that area wanted to sort of come in. And then we do have 2 from the Information Commissioner about having making sure that we do implement things as quickly as possible, and if there's a repeat of a particular incident, taking the learning from that on board, as well as a system of recording personal data breaches. So the update for that one was that the new solution has been implemented with an updated data capture, including breach cause and lessons learned, so that reflective learning. And then for the 3 Food Standards Agency ones, that was around food hygiene interventions being carried out at the minimum frequency that they should. So the update, well, I think Willem kind of mentioned this earlier, didn't he? But the other one was around food standards interventions, basically being carried out and against the law code of practice, and that the enforcement service plans developed are in accordance with the guidance in the framework agreement. So there's a bit more there on page 102.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Catherine. It's helpful to understand that. Thank you. Thanks very much. Ellen, you wanted to come in?
Hi, yeah, if I could, thanks. Just to give a bit more information around the 2 that Catherine just mentioned there. So the tracker 136 and 173. So these are recommendations from the Information Commissioner. Just in terms of 136, that is about a system and about a system that is actually in. We've actually built the system, but what we're currently doing at the minute is through the testing of it, even though we've got the system built that records the personal data breaches, and we've got the functionality in it to actually identify the trends. What we haven't got quite right is a prompting for that, so for us to be able to analyze it. So that's the work at the moment. It's like the phase 2 of building the system itself. So it's off track, even though we've got the system. It is off track because we still need to do that second piece of work. week, and an update on when that second piece of work will be done. It is on the list of digital transformation programs. It is on the digital transformation program, but it is a list along with about 40 other digital projects we need to look at. So it is one of the pieces of work that we need to look to see how soon we can do that. Picking up on the tracker 173, and this related to a breach a while ago involving the school and HR. There was actually no action when it went to the Information Commission officer. There was no action that came back to us. However, we actually recommended 10 actions that we wanted to do ourselves. So the tracker here is around the 10 recommendations that we put forward. Of those 10 recommendations, we've completed 8, and we've just got 2 outstanding at the moment. One is to do with training for school clerks up to kind of governors, which we've got scheduled in for October coming up now. And the other one was around the information which is kind of collected through witness statements when transcription, looking at the quality of that, and we're looking at potential using kind of magic notes to do that. So we're testing and trialing that at the moment, but it's having the time for this for HR to kind of to test that. So yeah, just a bit of an update on those 2.
Thanks, Ellen. That's really helpful. Willem, briefly, please.
Very, very briefly, in relation to the food hygiene, we're making very significant progress there, and it is progress with the environmental health officers, with the recruitment, and that has shown very good trends. In relation to food standards elements of things, we have restructured the team to add additional capacity, reallocated work from fraud into do the food standards element. We are looking to train internally our trading standards officers so that more are food trained, so they can undertake in that competency levels. But we have struggled with recruitment. We've all changed the job description so that we've reduced the qualification requirements. But we've been unable to recruit after numerous occasions. We have then looked at consultants available on our consultants framework. We've been unable to find them on our consultants framework. So we're going out to other consultants frameworks now to try to get that qualification people. But we'll see how that progresses. We've also got an element of sickness with the qualified works there. So just for future trends, we are expecting that to be under potentially a bit of pressure there. We're also looking at doing things like AI in order to help those officers. But there are processes taking place to improve the situation there, but we are facing some difficulties. And those difficulties in recruitment is national, it's not just Powys County Council, sorry. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Daniel, briefly, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to confirm on item 137 there, in terms of the Net Zero Programme Manager, we're expecting a report this autumn. So I look forward to receiving that and sharing it with you all.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you for your advice. I'm going to move us on, colleagues, and thank everyone and Catherine's team for the tracker. Working group reports. I chair the Internal Audit Working Group. We have a meeting next week, as Ian referenced earlier in the meeting, so there's not a particular update there, but there will be a meeting next week, so there will be a more effective update at our next full committee meeting. Gareth, would you like to just briefly update the committee on the reconstituted capital working group, please?
Yes, we held an initial meeting, and before the summer break, that raised several questions which Kath has put out to different officers, and hopefully we get these replies collated for our next meeting, which is in a couple of weeks' time. In the meantime, we held a one-off meeting with education colleagues who gave us a very insightful presentation on modular buildings, and we'll revisit that after we've had a look at the capital assets and the farm estate.
Thank you. Thanks, Gareth. Just on a broader point, should any of the newer members of the committee wish to join any of the working groups, you're very welcome to do so. At any time, just drop me or Kath a message to say that you would wish to support the working groups. Any questions on the working groups before I move us on? Item 13 summarises our work programme. Thanks very much to Carrie Ann for having a bit of a refresh of the work programme. Very grateful to her for doing that. Any questions? Pete, I can see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just picking up on Clive's point earlier, is if we're looking to do our whistleblowing reviews on the anniversary of when we did them last time, could I just request that they're added into the work programme, please?
Yes, of course, Councillor Pete. I'm sure Carrie Ann will do that. Carrie Ann, yep. Thank you very much.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
both.
Thank you. Thank you. If there are no further comments on the work plan, the work programme, I'll move us on to item 14, which is the Q1 strategic risk register. And is Bets with us? No?
No.
Oh, you are?
I am, but I believe Councillor Thomas is presenting the report.
Okay, Councillor David, Councillor David. Okay, that's fine. That is not a problem. That's very, very welcome. So item 14, the strategic risk register update, and Councillor David will briefly introduce this and assume that everyone has properly read the report.
Chair, I don't believe Councillor David is with us.
All right,
I believe
okay.
he's away at the moment. So
All right, okay. A little hiccup there. Anyway, let's assume that everyone has properly read the report. And let's ask questions. We'll go straight to questions. If anyone has any point to raise on the strategic risk register, please. We've got a couple of deep dives to do, and I've got my eye on the clock. As I say, I don't want to inappropriately foreshorten things, but at the same time, I do not want to extend the meeting more than is absolutely necessary. Pete.
Just a quick one, please, if I may, Chair.
Yep.
I was just looking at the risk around the financially sustainable budget and reducing the level of that risk rating from 20 to 16. I did hear the Section 151 officers' comments earlier on around the council tax for the self-catering units. So could I just seek confirmation that that will not affect the need to reduce the rating on this risk, please?
absolutely, that is the case. So that on its own doesn't amend the scoring for this risk. I will say, though, this risk is under constant review, as are all of the risks across the council. But with this one, based on where we currently find ourselves in terms of how we're managing our budgets, our 5-year planning now has been strengthened. So all of that provides some mitigation to help us manage this risk more effectively. So that's the reason the scoring has been amended. So we are still in a significant challenge, as you all appreciate, but we believe the processes and things that we've got in place are helping us to manage that effectively at the moment. But it will be kept under constant review, particularly as we get more information through the autumn in terms of funding and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. Just one from me, and then I'll bring Councillor Chris in. Page 130 notes that the Audit Wales risk report is on schedule for the end of September. Is that still the case? And when is that likely to come to committee?
Shall I jump in there, Jane? Yeah, it was delayed by Audit Wales, not by and it is due to, we're expecting it any week now, and it's scheduled to come to committee in October.
Right, okay. And are we confident that it will come to committee in October?
We are confident so long as the timetable that we've been advised it comes into fruition.
Right, okay. Again, this is something that obviously the committee takes a particular interest in, given our remit, so we wouldn't want it to drift unnecessarily. Emma, your hand was up very briefly, but it's gone.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as long as we get the responses required, which I think is in train at the moment, then we should be able to meet those deadlines. that Bets has just said.
Thanks very much. Thanks. Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Chair. On two areas for questions, if I may. One is the WSIS system ASC 0064. Obviously, I understand that data cleansing is still going on for the new system that we're going to be implementing from next year. I just wanted to make sure that that was still on track. And are we aware with the current system that we're using, has there been any downtime of that system? And if, because it links in with the health board, do we have notification if the health board system goes down, our system goes down, do we inform the health board because it is a cross system at the moment? And then in relation to ASC 0071 regarding adult services, there's been no review on that since June, but one of the actions that is in there is they were looking to do a financial analysis around the nursing home sector, and that's not going to be completed until December. I wanted to know the reason of why it's such a long timeline, because some of this we would have understood the market, and that is putting pressures in other parts of the system with delayed transfers of care. And I just wanted to get an understanding of that, please.
Thanks very much. Who can take Chris's questions? Is it Sharon? Sharon.
Hi, I could take the last one around the adult social care financial risk. What I was alluding to there was a process that we're undertaking with each of our nursing homes, where we're looking at the financial costs to the packages, and we do that with PTHB and our colleagues, our finance colleagues in PTHB, and the work is quite intensive, Councillor Chris. It's not an overarching review of the whole marketplace. It's an individual home by home systematic approach to understanding costs. And some of the work that we're doing to supplement that is work that we're doing nationally through AWASH and the heads of All Wales Heads of Service and Directors Group around understanding the FNC rates and how other local authorities are finding and tackling the issues around increasing costs across the nursing sector. So it's a programme of work that is quite intensive.
Thank you. Ellen?
Hi, yeah. Councillor Walsh, just picking up on your first couple of points around the data kind of migration. So we've got a programme of work at the moment, like you said, I think most people are aware of that. So at the moment, we've been cleansing a lot of data. We've got lots of task and finish groups around this. The migration of the data will be the next key thing for us to do. However, it's not as simple as we have to work with all those other local authorities who are actually using WCCS at the moment. So it's not just as easy as us taking data out and put it into our new system that we've purchased. It is a regional approach. So we are part of that regional group. We have those discussions. We are talking to Health Board as well. Their picture's kind of different in terms of the system that they're going to go forward with. But we are in contact with them to make sure that any integrated data that we've got, to see how we can make sure we migrate that over. You asked a second question. Sorry, Councillor Walsh. It was one about downtime. I just asked John to come in here, but I'm not aware. I haven't been. Kind of Sharon, you might know more, but I'm not aware of any additional downtime. If anything, it's quite stable at the moment. So it's been
better than it has been for a long time.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thanks very much both, and thanks Councillor Chris for your questions. And I know this is an area in which you will maintain your very strong interest, and rightly so. Thank you very much. I'm going to move us on, colleagues. and thank Bets and colleagues for the strategic risk register and for the answers to all of our questions. I'm going to move us on to agenda item 15, in which we need the motion moved and seconded for the committee to move into private session. Councillor William has kindly moved the motion. Can I have a seconder, please? And I'll have Councillor Pete as the seconder. Thank you very much. On that basis,
Chair,
can we have a show?
sorry to interrupt you. Could I just have a show of hands from committee members?
I was just about to say, could we have a show of
Sorry.
hands?
Sorry
Thank
about
you.
that.
Following the motion, could we have a show of hands? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move us across now.
Thank you very much.